seen it. Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming. Okay.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Street Apologists Live. Today is Reformation Day, Tuesday, October 31st. I got to show you my shirt before we get started. Even though it's not today's topic, I got my shirt that says Squad Goals. Luther, Knox, Calvin, I'm not saying them in order, am I? And Wycliffe and Spurgeon. I don't know if you could hear that. I know I was off camera. But I did intend to show you that. And that's because it's Reformation Day. And I dropped a thing on Knox recently, and I got another follow-up to that I'm going to drop kind of soon here. But stick around in the next couple of days. I am going to cover the whole situation where you had pro-Palestinian supporters fighting with Hebrew Israelites in Chicago. I'm going to cover that either today or tomorrow. I'll let you know. You'll see it's on the thing, but I might shuffle it around a little bit. Anyways, thank you for coming on in. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe. Do all the stuff you know you're supposed to do, like leaving comments and, of course, super chats and signing up for Patreon. Those things are greatly appreciated. The information's on the screen. But without any further ado, let's get into talking to today's guest, Dumisani Washington. I'm very glad to have him. Welcome to Street Apologists Live. You are now on air. How you doing?
Okay, I'm doing good, sir. How you doing today?
Doing all right. It's good to have you.
Thanks,
You're
sir.
a controversial man, aren't you?
For some, I believe so, probably.
Why are you controversial, Dumisani? Why do people say you're controversial?
You know what, vocab? It's funny. I guess for all my little life, by my perspective, I don't see it as controversy. I'll have a position. The way I was raised, I'm don't really concern myself with how popular the position is. How well received it might be. I get that from my parents. It's really deep in my DNA. So by that definition, yeah, I'm probably controversial, but from my perspective, I just try to call it like I see it. You know, I'm a baseball man, so I call balls and strikes as best I can. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, well, that's good to hear. You see the D-backs are facing off against the Rangers in the World Series. You know I'm in Arizona.
Oh, that is right. You are in Arizona. You know what? I haven't followed much. I'm from California. I don't live there now, but I've been a Giants fan literally all my life. So don't got a lot of hate for the D-backs. I remember when they took our boy Matt Williams way back in the day for people my age and everything. Other than that, it's all good though. Yes,
it's like in the late 90s.
Yes, sir. Way back.
Okay, so you've got a book, Zionism and the Black Church. Tell me about this book.
So Zionism the Black Church, second edition was written, published February 2021. But vocab, when I first wrote it, it was back in 2013/14. After my first trip to Israel, which was actually December 2012. Now I had I've been a Christian all my life from a very young age, from a big family, youngest of 7 children, raised Baptist. Born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we moved to California as a baby, but we stayed within the Baptist faith all of our lives. My mom and dad very involved, you know, deacons and deaconesses and all that stuff and everything. All the church babies in the house, you know what I'm talking about. You're there like 6 days a week. You're there for rehearsal. You're there for all the kind of stuff. But I always had love for the scriptures. I always did. And I always had love for the Old and New Testament. Right? As a matter of fact, vocab, I probably read the Old Testament more than I did the New Testament. This as a kid, right? I don't really know the difference, right? I don't understand them theologically, right? I'm just reading the Old Testament for me was Moses and the children of Israel. It was David. It was the patriarchs, all of that, right? And these stories fascinated me, as well as the Gospels, right? I love reading about the Gospels, reading Acts. And I came up that way. And so there was always this affinity for all things Israel, Hebrew, the Israelites, you know, the redemption, all that stuff, right? And also particularly in the older Black church style, right? You had everything from those Negro spirituals that came from the slave days that were brought towards the whole gospel era. And there's a lot of songs and preaching around Moses and the children of Israel and coming out of slavery. You know, I mean, Dr. King himself would refer to those types of things during the civil rights movement. So none of those things were foreign to me as how I was brought up, right? So the music,
Harriet Tubman was known as Moses,
known as Moses, absolutely right. And all these songs about Jericho, the walls of Jericho falling down, and let my people go. Songs about Jerusalem, Zion, all those things, right? So this was a very standard fare for me. But as a young kid, I was captivated by it, right? You know, this was like, you know, I want to know about these things and how to read the scriptures along those lines. It was only when I got older when someone would point out to me, they'd ask me, why you read the Old Testament so much? I never thought about it like that, right? It's not like I didn't read the New Testament, right? But I would say something about Jeremiah this or Isaiah that, and like going, boy, you really love that Old Testament. As I got older, I realized that there was Christians that were saying that, who had their own perception of quote unquote Old Testament, right? They whatever they thought about it when they heard somebody kind of, at least in my circles, say something about a scripture like that, then they would sometimes, bring that to mind and everything. So the book came out of a lot of that vocab. I left Israel in December 2012 after my first trip with a strong sense that I needed to do what I could to strengthen the ties between the Black and Jewish community. Not that there aren't Black Jews, there's Black Jews, white Jews, and it wasn't about that, but strengthening the ties between those communities and Israel and Africa. There's a lot of Africa in the work that we do with our organization. So that's where the book came from. It's politics, it's scripture, it's culture, it's history. 6 chapters that go through everything from Africa-Israel tie. We even talk about when the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon 3,000 years ago, right? And we talk about Black Jewish history, Booker T. Washington, Julius Rosenwald. We try to weave a story that shows this connection that's not just political, but it's also deeply spiritual, and why it has been that way for such a long time.
And here is the cover of the book. I'm a Dumisani Washington, Zionism the Black Church. Everyone look at the subtitle, Why Standing with Israel Will Be a Defining Issue for Christians of Color in the 21st Century. I'm going to drop the link to this book in the chat. Where do you prefer to be? Amazon, or do you got another preferred place?
Amazon is fine. People can go to our publishing company is called Umndeni Press. So if they go to UMNDENI press.com, they'll see it on that platform as well. But it's on all the different platforms, including it's on audiobook, digital. You can do it at Kindle, e-reader, all those things. So absolutely.
All right, here, I'll drop the link to the website
Yes,
in the live chat. Why is standing with Israel the defining issue for people of color in the 21st century? Why is that?
There has been vocab, and I'll do a more succinct version of it here. I just talked a little bit about the whole ancient part, right? The scriptures and this connection, the Negro spirituals, and all these very, very deep connections that go back, whether millennia or centuries. But in the modern sense, the modern day of Israel, the 1948 modern day Jewish state of Israel, when it comes to the fight for Israel's existence, first the Arab League that came against it, led by Egypt. And then, of course, later on, you had Palestinian groups like the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Of course, we know about Hamas, what just happened on October 7th and everything. The propaganda that would almost always be used to delegitimize Israel's existence would be used out of the Black experience, calling Israel an apartheid state, calling Zionism racism, those types of things.
Right.
Those weren't happenstance. Those weren't just random things, right? We do the work and we show as the kids say, we have all the receipts. We talk about it in the book, right? About why they chose those terms. What was the purpose for either the Arab League and then later on the PLO for focusing on Black leaders when it came to Israel? I hear Black folks with the 12% of the population, 13% of the population, right? And again, and not the power base, right? They're not in the presidency, they're not in the White House, they're not in the Oval Office, and all those things. But for some reason, it became very important in terms of the disinformation that was both Soviet, for people who don't realize the whole anti-Zionist thing that came from Stalin from the late 40s and through on, the Palestine Liberation Organization. I'm not trying to blow people's minds, but you can go Google this as well. Oh, don't Google it. Google's not always the best thing, but we have all the receipts.
DuckDuckGo's
right.
a little better.
DuckDuckGo, there you go. The PLO was formed by the KGB, right? I'm not saying that Palestinians aren't a people. I'm not saying there's not a Palestine liberation in terms of where some people's political leanings may be. I'm saying that the PLO as an organization and that ideology was formed by the KGB, and Yasser Arafat, who became its the chairman in 1969, was also trained by the KGB, right? This was a disinformation tool to delegitimize Israel. And for those who may be asking why, because Israel's allies, the United States and the Soviet Union, was opposed to them, and they joined with the Arab powers to delegitimize Israel and the United States in the United Nations and beyond. And that's a lot of the whole protocols of the elders of Zion, Jews run the world, all that kind of the modern day of that, particularly in the West, came from the Soviet Union, right? So and it victimized the Black community probably more than others because of how they would always try to use the Black community for that purpose.
Yeah, no doubt. I had on Robert Spencer, very informative show. He's got a great book called The Palestinian Delusion, very subtle title. And in it, he said the same thing. And people in the live chat were like, wait, the KJB? What? You know, shocked to hear that.
They are. Most people are. And when I found just like in your work, vocab, sometimes you'll drop knowledge on someone and it'll blow their minds, right? You'll be like, okay, hey, actually, here's the receipts for this. And if they're married to their version of it and they're looking at what you're saying and the receipts that you have, the choice they have to make immediately is like either they cling to what they've always thought or listen to what you are saying now and with the evidence that you have. And we find this same thing when it comes to something like the Palestine Liberation Organization. Oftentimes, depending on how people feel about it, when you tell them, yeah, no, that was some folks in Russia, they actually put it, oh man, are you crazy? Free Palestine. Okay, now I hear all that. I hear all your slogans. I'm just telling you where the actual organization came from and what purpose. Why were they formed to delegitimize Israel?
Yeah, kind of like when we tell people, Margaret Sanger started Planned Parenthood with a little bit of genocide on the mind.
Yes, sir. Come on, yeah, absolutely, right. And then people who love her, like, oh my God, what are you saying? It's like, no, she was the ultimate white supremacist who thought that Black folks and other folks needed to just be exterminated, right?
Yeah, that was human weeds. Weeds. She was into a hard form of eugenics there. We do have a question for you, Bree and Babes podcast. Everyone subscribe to Bree and Babes podcast. She does good work there. She says, Dumisani, where are you from? I think she's talking about further back. She says, I asked because he has an African name.
Yes, sir. So my first name, Dumisani, is actually a Zulu language name. It actually means praise. It is not my given name. I talk about that in my book as well. That was not my born name. I had an African naming ceremony back in the 90s. So that's especially for my African friends, they'll know either you're from Zimbabwe or you're from South Africa. So no, I was born and raised in the United States, but the name is African. Yes, absolutely, man.
Good catch, Bree and Babes. IBSI, that's what I have underneath your name on the screen. Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Where are you based out of as far as the IBSI, and what do you do there?
We are based outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And again, now Charlotte's not my grow up home. It's my home now. I've been here for about 3 years. Grew up in California. So we started in California, Stockton, California, right there in Northern California. So we are based now outside of Charlotte in the Union County area. And our physical location is here, but of course we work across the country and do a lot of traveling back and forth between Africa and Israel. And we do advocacy, right? We have 3 branches of our work at the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. One is education, whether that's books, articles, videos, the type of thing. We give information about some of the things I'm talking about now, the history of why it's important for the Black church and the Black community to know about Israel, to know its ties and its connections and all those things. The second one would be the Speakers Bureau. We have speakers, myself, daughter-in-law, other parts of our staff. We speak in churches, synagogues, universities, right? We have wherever these venues are where we're having this kind of conversation is where we are. I just came back from Boston a couple of days ago at an event up there. And then lastly, it's called our Peace Initiative. Plan, that's an acronym for Plan for Education, Advocacy, and Community Engagement. That's where we recruit young Black men and women across the country. And we go on what's called a 9-month journey. We do a study each month, and we're unpacking all of what I'm talking about now, the biblical part, the geopolitical part, the history part, all these types of things for people to know. And we take 2 overseas trips, one's to Africa, and the second one is to Israel. Last December, we were in South Africa. And then in June, we were in Israel. And that was our pilot program. Our plan is to next year launch the next phase of it, where we are recruiting 20 Black young men and women to do that. and another 20 pastors to what we have called IBSI pastors, the straight clergy version of the Peace Initiative.
Excellent. Shout out to Jay Robarge for the super chat. Thank you very much, Jay. And to everyone watching who's hit that like button and all of that. On social media, if people want to find your work, where should they go?
Go to our website, first and foremost, IBSI.org, IBSI.org. And you can see we have some of our information there that I just talked about, including our Substack, which is called Africa Israel Weekly. Our videos are there as well. And then if you go scroll on down on the homepage of IBSI.org, you'll see all of our social media channels. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And so we are constantly posting and sharing information. A lot of what we do is also music. The executive director I'm the founder and the CEO. The executive director is my son, Joshua, who's also a professional musician. And so he writes, records, produces everything. And so there are times when some of our events will have some of the music infused in there as well. So the best place to start, IBSI.org, and check us out.
Excellent. Okay. IBSI, it's right in the name, Black Solidarity with Israel. I want to keep on reiterating or getting different angles on this. Why should there be Black solidarity with Israel?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I found, VOCAB, and when I went to Israel in December 2012, I was already aware of things like Dr. King's pro-Israel stance, right? There's some generic things that I knew. I was already aware of the deep ties with the Black and Jewish community during the civil rights movement, right? You have the Jewish community was like 2% of the American population, but were completely overrepresented when it came to civil rights.
Yeah.
Starting from NAACP, when the NAACP was founded, most people don't know, it was Black and Jewish Americans who founded it, and the first leaders of it were actually Jewish. And for the cynics out there, it's because they were telling what to do. No, because in the organization, they were actually working together, and the Black leaders eventually began to take those top spots themselves. But it was always a Black and Jewish connection that actually happened there. And again, for those terms of history, go back even further. Before there's an NAACP, there were the synergy between people like Julius Rosenwald of Sears Roebuck fame, the multi-billionaire, right, even back in the day, who worked with Booker T. Washington to build Rosenwald schools all over the country because Black people were shut out of the education system, right? So this goes way, way, way back. So when we talk about that, VOCAB, one of the things we discussed was that these weren't just feel-good moments, right? This was something that was on a very much deeper level, right? And yes, some of it was about white supremacy, the Klan who hated Black folks, who hated Jews, who hated Hispanics, right? They hated, their thing was a pure white race like the Nazis, right? There was that whole thing. There was definitely that there, right? So they saw Jews, they didn't care how light-skinned they were. Jews were these people who killed Jesus, quote unquote. They were the people who were responsible for all the pain and hurt and suffering and all that stuff. So they saw everybody, those types of people who were not, quote, white by their definition in that category. That all that was there. But what we found in our work, however, was that the deeper part of it was the synergy. What we say in our organization is that the first ever Africa-Israel summit was 3,000 years ago when the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon in Jerusalem, right? It's recorded in the scriptures. The Ethiopians call them Makeda, right? And they have their own version of that actual story actually happening as well. Well, as we look at it scripturally, even though that happened under King Solomon, it was Solomon's father, David, who in Psalm 68 prophesied that would happen. Psalm 68, verse 31, princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch her hands to God. He's actually talking about the royalty and bringing a gift to Jerusalem. And what happens? While David's son Solomon's on the throne, Ethiopia brings the gift, right? And we were saying that this wasn't just a thing. This was a prophetic thing. There's a prophetic utterance, if you will, that was actually happening. These deep ties have proven to be good, not just for both communities, but for the world. It was the Black and Jewish communities during the civil rights movement who defined what civil rights would be, even in other parts of the world, right? And when you had the education initiatives between Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, right, who actually defined what in the education should look like and everyone having access to it at that time, we found that those things, again, weren't just happenstance. When the state of Israel was reborn, in 1948, and you had all the detractors and stuff like that. The United States was an ally. You had other countries that stood along line, and some who opposed everything. As I said before, as the propaganda against Israel increased, and now I'm speaking specifically, everyone, after the initial wars between the Arab and the Israeli powers. 1948, 1956, 1967, 1973, these different flashpoints in which the Arab powers would try to, and ladies and gentlemen, those wars were not about just territory. It was an attempt to erase Israel from the map. Those wars were never about, oh, this marcation in this land and how much feet. No, it was never about that, right?
That's the whole chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. Isn't that how it goes, right? The river's the Jordan, and the sea's the
Mediterranean.
Yeah, they're saying that there'll be no Jews up in here. That's what that's saying.
That has always been the case.
Yeah.
And for those people who believe they're standing on the side of justice, Hamas is just the latest iteration of that. They don't care about how much land. They care about wiping Jews off the map, and not just the Jews in Israel, but worldwide. Hamas is committed to the worldwide extinguishing of Jews, period. They say that in their own charter, right? So this is not about just land, right?
Real quick, so, he's exactly right, everybody. And some of you are here, and I mentioned this briefly before we went on Dumisani. Anthony Rogers and I went through the Hamas charter on a live stream. When you do something like that and you're reading all this stuff, it's not going to be the most popular live stream of all time. But we did go through. And what's crazy is we went through it in great detail. I think we were on there for 2 hours. We only made it through half of it. But what we did is brought in more Quranic verses, more hadith to even give further background, and also historical examples related to what they're saying. And there's things I didn't understand. I would ask Anthony, and he has a greater depth of knowledge on some of that, so he would fill me in, and we'd fill the audience. And it was a great program. So what he's saying is exactly right. And I did an interview recently where I said, honestly, I don't think people should be commenting negatively on this unless they've read the Hamas charter. And if you haven't read the Hamas charter, I think you should shut up. And I could not help but say it, because I'm saying, how do you going to comment on what Hamas is and what they're doing unless you know what they've written about what they're doing?
So VOCAB, I know this is our first time actually kind of talking and doing an interview and all that stuff and everything. And I followed your work. And one of the many things that I've appreciated about it is that you bring you do your receipts, right? You bring them, right? You're like, okay, you don't just say stuff. You're like, oh, here, look at this, read that. And again, we know what does the scripture say about it, right? Paul said in the word in the last days, men will not endure sound doctrine, right? And we know he's talking specifically about the scriptures, but we also see that culturally, right? That people want to hashtag, they want to tweet, they want to TikTok, right? But they don't want to do the deeper dive. And so what it has done effectively has removed real debate and discussion about how I feel, what I think, and whoever said whatever on whatever social media platform, right? So you're absolutely right. For the people who would then defend Hamas, and back to your questions you're asking, the whole black part of it, well, the black community has been accessed the most. When the PLO started its disinformation campaign, who does Yasser Arafat reach out to first? Eldridge Cleaver of the Black Panthers, Angela Davis, right? Why is he reaching out to young black militant civil rights leaders? Because here was the plan. If I just stand up and say I want to slaughter the Jews, no one's going to feel me. But if I stand next to black civil rights leaders and say, we are fighting for our freedom, we are the civil rights leaders of our day, people go, oh, well, those Jews, and especially if they're already anti-Semitic, right? It's not that big a leap. They would say, just like the white people are beating you all down in these lunch counters, that's what these no good Jews are doing to us in the land, and blah, blah, blah. And folks went, boom. Now, the connection was false, but it was easier to just do that, right? He couldn't just stay safe from the river to the sea because, again, that was too obvious. So what does Hamas does? They don't stand up and quote their charter. They just say, we want Palestine to be free. Okay, who doesn't want freedom, right? That's, again, in the name. Palestine liberation. Who doesn't want liberation? Everybody should be liberated, right? Those are good terms. The problem was that, like you said, Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood. Oh, who doesn't want to plan their parenthood, right? No, dude, that's not what that's about, right? What she was about was kill these black ones first, kill these other ones too, but no one's going to buy that, right? They're going to say, oh, here's an organization to kill black people. Right? Okay, nobody's going to sign up on that. But if you say, ooh, here's one, we're going to help you plan your community. Oh, yeah, that's cool. That's what the disinformation has always been. And they've always used black community, black people to sell it as a civil rights movement. And here we are. This is why you got kids on the campuses right now waving Palestinian flags, talking about free, free Palestine. They don't know what they're talking about, but someone told them this is a civil rights issue.
Yeah. And Robert Spencer brings that out too, how, basically behind closed doors, talking to each other is what I mean. You have, strategizing about how to sell this to people, basically. And it's like, look, if we say it's this and that, well, the way they understood it is non-Muslims won't get on board. But if we make it a struggle against oppression and about liberation, then non-Muslims can get on. I was like, why wouldn't we want to rally Christian support and even Jewish support where we can? Why wouldn't we want to have that? And that was, and again, Robert Spencer brings this out in The Palestinian Delusion. I encourage everybody to get it, as well as I've linked to in the top, I've pinned the link to your book as well. And that's a very true fact. Real quick, house cleaning. Shout out to Richie Torres for the super chat. I see your comment about yesterday's program. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Richie. And yeah, you're right. I do hope the D-backs win game 4 as well. So shout out to everyone in the live chat coming through. James G says, what I see nowadays are black folks standing with Palestine. Is that true? Is that false? What do we do? What do you think?
It is true on the surface part. It is not part of the deeper numbers. And again, I talk about this in my book. As a matter of fact, everyone, not just my book, Zionism the Black Church, but on our Africa Israel Weekly, that's our Substack, right? You can go to our website, IBSI.org, scroll down to Africa Israel Weekly, and you'll see articles. We write about these types of things. This is what we do. And we were founded back in 2013. So we've been around for a little while. It is a misnomer that the majority of the black community, Christian or non-Christian, are pro-Palestinian. As a matter of fact, we have data, we have numbers, everything. Yeah, there's groups like the ADL will measure anti-Semitism. There have been different focus groups that have done sentiments on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and what has been consistently the case to the 60, 70 percentile, most black Americans support the same thing: Israel's right to exist, Israel's right to defend itself, even if they have a great deal of sympathy for the Palestinian people, right? So it has never been a one-off, like, well, they hate Arabs, but generally speaking, everyone, black American community, like the general portion of the American community, supports Israel. Now, the stats change, or they fluctuate depending on age, right? Younger tend to side more towards the Palestinian side, the older more towards Israel's side and security, that type of thing. But still, the majority sides with Israel. I mean, Israel's right to exist. I'm not saying sides with Israel as against the Palestinian people. The problem, however, and VOCAB would know this better than anybody, when it comes to what gets put out in the media, when it comes to some of the loudest voices on social media, it would give an appearance that somehow those black voices, right, because they are anti-Israel, they are speaking for the majority of the black community. Whether you're talking about Louis Farrakhan, whether you're talking about back in the day, some of the stuff that Al Sharpton has said back in the day in terms of Jews, people would look at those things and say, "Oh my God, these black people feel this way." Well,
Jesse Jackson said some messed up stuff too.
Yeah, Jaime Town, all that stuff, right? Yeah. Jesse Jackson was one of the first ones. Remember I told you about? Remember again, history. Yasser Arafat reached out to the younger black, I say the younger black civil rights leaders, because Dr. King and the rest of them knew what was what. This is why they stood with Israel. Again, they weren't against the Arab population as well, but they understood before all the propaganda took hold. Dr. King, one of his last public statements was in favor of Israel's right to exist and defend itself 10 days before he was killed, right? And he spoke, as he said, for the vast majority of the civil rights community. It was the younger ones, like the Eldridge Cleavers, right? Now, remember, Dr. King, he was assassinated, everyone, at 39 years old, didn't even see 40, but he had been on the scene for close to 15 years, right? So the issue was that he was an elder statesman. The younger ones were more of the radical by any means necessary, and they were very vulnerable to the Marxist disinformation that actually came their way that told them that your real problem is these Zionists. So they took a fight against racism, coupled it with a anti-Zionism, because that's what it was sold. This is back in the 60s, ladies and gentlemen. And then they began to parrot those talking points because that's how it was told to them. Quick fun fact, everyone. Eldridge Cleaver bought all of that until he went out and found out for himself. He fled to Cuba. He saw what communism really was. Then he fled to Algeria and other parts of communist nations, both in the Arab world and the European world. And he saw the real human rights abuses, as well as black slaves all over this part of Africa. And he came back supporting Israel, supporting Israel's right to exist. He did a complete 180, right? That part, everybody talks about soul on ice, right? They don't really know the other part of that story about how Eldridge Cleaver, formerly the Minister of Information for the Black Panthers, actually got unbrainwashed, if you will, because he got all the receipts. He learned all of the truth. This is one of the reasons why people would associate Black people with an anti-Israel thing, because of the iconic leaders who has sometimes either parroted those talking points, or what happens right now with a lot of the negative talk that has come from high-profile political leaders.
Yeah, and then he became a Mormon at one point, an evangelical Christian at one point, a Catholic at one point. It's a very interesting story.
Yes, sir.
That he had there.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you define Zionism?
Yes,
Because I have a poll running right now, and it says,
right.
"Are you a Zionist? Yes or no?" Right now, I got 53% no. But
right.
maybe if it's defined a certain way, maybe they'll say yes. How do we get the official definition of Zionism? I don't know about that, but we can at least get yours.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the way we do it, both in my book and our organization, Zionism at its root is the belief that Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people, right? That God, not just in the scriptures where he, going back to the Abrahamic covenant, I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, and come leave your father's land and go to a land I will show you. A Zionist then is someone then who both believes, now this is a basic definition, there's millions of definitions, who both believe God's covenant in that sense with Israel, and that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people, the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Political Zionism is something where people often are distracted by because of, particularly in terms of the modern day, right? Political Zionism would be the nation state of Israel and Israel's right then to have that land, not so much based on the biblical reality, but based on the fact that it is their ancestral homeland, and they have a right to live and defend themselves in that area, right? The people who were the modern fathers of Zionism, if you will, the people like the Theodor Herzls and everything, you probably know this already, they weren't even religious at all. Some of them were atheists, right?
Pretty secular originally. So that would be political Zionism. And
yes, sir.
You're saying all, well, I don't want to say all, but the essence of what they're saying in regards to that was, this is the ancestral homeland of our people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so would you say that's the bare bones essence? Because in the first version, would you call that theological Zionism, perhaps?
Yeah, I would call that biblical Zionism. Yes, sir.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then, do you think all Christians should be Zionists of some form or fashion?
I believe that every Christian I believe for Christians who say that they believe or hold to the word of God as truth, right? That they would, whether they use the term Zionist or not, would support Israel's both right to exist, defend itself, and would see it as the land, the homeland of the Jewish people. Yes. I think that for any Christian who has a fundamental understanding of the scriptures when it comes to both God's relationship with Israel and him, the land of Israel, being something he gave to them, then yes, they would support Israel living in that land. Obviously, when it comes to Christian denominations, and there's an innumerable number of them, there's all kinds of different perspectives on that. That range from anti-Israel, which they're straight up believe it should just be a Palestinian land, right? What we call the Christian Palestinianists is what we call them, right? Some of them call that themselves, all the way to the other spectrum, right? Where, they not only believe, they are the ones, I see the other spectrum. Now I'm talking about the not a healthy one at all. I'm talking about going all the way to that side, that the only reason why the Jews need to go back to the land is to trigger the second coming of Jesus. And that's all in other words, there's no support of the land of the people. There's just this other agenda that here, we don't really care. They live or die. There's not a bless those who bless you, none of that stuff. Just get them all to Israel so Jesus would come back. There's that side of it as well. That's not just, I want to be very clear, that is not my theological position in that sense.
Well, I'm going to bring in one little comment here from the live chat, and this is a disagreeing comment. I think this is some kind of conscious community or Hebrew Israelite. I'm not sure his exact position.
Yes, sir.
Black Zionist is worse than a traitor, and he says that he wants you to have this conversation on Sonnet. He would get cool. Just real quick on that, Ty. I went on Sonetta multiple times. That's not what happened. If you bring the receipts and the facts, you'll be all right on Sonetta or any place. And he says, no, Christians should not be Zionists. Zionists don't even believe in Jesus. Want to
So then
comment on some of that?
Right. No, absolutely. First of all, to his last statement, which is absolutely ridiculous. So then a Christian Zionist who's a Christian because he believes in Jesus, but also believes that Israel is homeland of Jewish people is by definition a refuting of what he just got through saying. Now, what you have in those comments is somebody's very passionate. They're passionately wrong, right? And he's trying to speak for Christians who actually stand with Israel and stand with the Jewish people being able to live in the land, right? So right there, what you're saying is completely not true. Not to mention the fact that from the Old to the New Testament, there are scriptures that speak to not just the eternal covenant that God has with Israel, right? Which Paul even affirmed as well, right? When you get to the Pauline scriptures, as difficult as they can be, as sometimes parsed as they can be, what we still have there is this acknowledgement of Israel. So for this person, and I'm welcome to go on whatever show, right? I guess cooled means schooled, or less cooled is the new term for that. Right? I don't know.
Maybe that's what he's trying to write. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, yes,
I think he was typing kind of fast. It probably was supposed to be schooled. Yeah, you're probably right.
Sir. And if you notice too, he said Christian Zionist is a traitor, and he spelled traitor wrong as well. But anyway, traitor, what you mean by that is that what he's saying in his mindset, that not only should a Christian not support Israel, right, not be a Zionist, but to do so is being a traitor. Now, the first thing you have to ask, a traitor to whom? To Hamas? Traitor to the PLO? Traitor to, you can read, I'm sorry, I can see on there.
No, I was just saying he's not a Christian. He's just someone who has compassion unlike us, basically.
So as a non-Christian, how are you going to speak to whether or not a Christian is supportive? See, that's the other thing. You're not even what Paul would call the household of quote unquote faith. How do you speak to what a Christian's theological leaning should be where Israel is concerned if you are not? Do you even know the scriptures? Can you point to any scripture that backs up what you're saying? Right. So this is what we're actually saying, which I'm sure we'll get into that some more. It is amazing. I was so today, vocab, you may have seen this. There's a very large Twitter account. He's deleted it since then. I don't know whoever censored man is. I don't know who that person is, right? About 600 plus thousand followers.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he did a tweet either yesterday or this morning, whenever I saw it. I don't remember when I saw it. I don't know when he did it. And the tweet was a long dragging of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Right? Apparently Netanyahu made a speech yesterday, whenever it was. And in that speech, because, there's a war against Hamas in Gaza, right? This is what's going on right now.
As there needs to be.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just no ceasefire over here, everybody.
Oh, goodness gracious.
That was the one time in a long time I had to agree with Hillary Clinton. I was like, oh, look. Right. Hillary Clinton speaking the truth. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Exactly, right. For those calling ceasefire after they done raped and killed and burnt and all the kind of stuff, that's just, anyway, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more too. So Netanyahu quotes Ecclesiastes, right? A time for war, time for peace, right? He quotes that there. This account, and I don't know if censored man is Christian or not, but I've seen a lot of this. And now, again, to the point about Christians in the scriptures, I've seen more Christian anti-Semites making a case against Israel and by de facto for Hamas, right? And they have no idea what they're doing, right? They're no idea what they're doing. So this particular account, I don't know how much of a Christian he is. He takes Bibi to task, now mind you, right, for quoting the Bible, not the Torah. And according to him, Bibi is a Jew who should be quoting Torah. But if he quotes the Bible...
yeah, I saw that. He was trying to say it was like a trick to get other people to listen or something. He should only quote Torah, not Tanakh. Okay, I saw that.
Vocab, not just other people, Christians, right? It was a trick to get Christians. And I'm saying, oh, come on, Vocab, you're a Bible man. I'm going, dude, are you kidding me right now? Ecclesiastes is in the Old Testament, right? Bibi Netanyahu can quote most of the scriptures. He's going to be quoting a Jew, right? So you're mad because what now? Because he didn't quote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. No, he quoted Kohelet, which is actually Ecclesiastes, right? Which is the preacher who's also Jewish, right? Solomon wrote much of that, right? So you're mad at him because he's trying to trick us. I said, no, that's just your biblical illiteracy. That is the illiteracy of the church. Remember the scripture, the prophet said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Now he's talking to Israel at that point, right? Here's the broader principle. Christians not knowing their Bible are getting them siding with Hamas waving Palestinian flags, talking about what would Jesus do. Are you guys kidding me right now? Please put that flag down and go read. Please go to a real Bible study. Please, even if you don't consider yourself a Zionist, even if you don't consider yourself a supporter of the political state of Israel, please don't sit there and drink the PLO and the Hamas brew, right? While you're trying to quote scriptures, disavowing. You know what? Here's the problem. The word of God says that you will be judged by the same manner by which you judge. If you're going to use the scriptures to try to demonize the Jewish people in Israel, you will stand before God, and the scriptures will then, and can I help you? There's way more scriptures on the other side of your issue than you think, right? This is what's going on right now. Christian influencers hashtagging, tweeting stuff in support of the Palestinian terrorists who are trying to destroy Israel as some sort of Jesus thing, as some sort of, this is what you should do according as a good Christian thing. Man, it's so much deception. It's not even funny.
Yeah, it's pretty wild out here. And I honestly think, I feel like even if a person was really uncertain about, what they thought about Israel, what they thought about Jewish people, and let's say they're a Christian, honestly, even if they're not a Christian, if you guys understood more about Hamas and global Islam and global jihad and what's really happening over there, I honestly just think the conversation would be different. But I feel like that's just left out, and people aren't really understanding and looking. Hamas, when they talk about being able to take over all of Israel, they frequently, everyone should know this, they frequently refer also to the churches are ours. They don't just say the synagogues, they say the churches too. And I read some of the literature, so I'm telling you that I read this. I don't have a quote on the top of my head, but even specifically mentioned the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, regardless of what you think of the Orthodox Church, or if you think Christ's tomb was at one point underneath there or not, the point is that kind of territorial expansion and domination, and we've already seen it. Everyone should remember what Constantinople's current name is, and the fact that Hagia Sophia is now a mosque. So this is a very real thing. And I think you brought out a quote, and you said, hey, ask people what this means. I think it was on your account. You said, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That comes from our Jewish friends who very much understand. And to your point, VOCAB, make no mistake about it, Christians who are listening, what Hamas just did to Jews in Israel is exactly what they want to do to me, VOCAB. They don't care if we're Catholics, Presbyterian, Church of God in Christ, speaking in tongue, Pentecost. They do not care. By definition,
they don't even care if you're a Hebrew Israelite.
Exactly.
Because I don't know if there were some Israelites living in the land of Israel, and I don't think they were killed, but they were close to the fighting and did have to hole up and protect themselves. I saw some interviews from people in the community that actually talked about this. They would come after them too. It would not matter who was over there on the other side of that border.
When they killed those 1,500 people, and there's another 200 plus that are being held hostage in Hamas in Gaza, and there's also, according to Caroline Glick, one of my friends and colleagues, another 400 plus that are still unaccounted for. Right, they don't know where they are. Right, when they killed them, VOCAB, they killed black ones, white ones, brown ones. There's one of my Ethiopian Israeli friends put out a meme, and it had 9 because he just fitted them on there. 9 different Ethiopian Jews, Ethiopian Israelis, all as dark skinned as me, slaughtered by Hamas. Right, some of them were doing insecurity. They were trying to fight back and hold off and save as many people as they could. Other people were in other areas and everything. So people, when Hamas went in there, they killed black Jews, white Jews, brown Jews, Christians, other Muslims, right? So, because Israel is a multi-ethnic, right? So I'm saying people don't recognize 20% of Israel's population is Arab, both Muslim and Christian, right? So when Hamas goes in, they fire those rockets, people, they are indiscriminate. They don't care. Oh, and by the way, Hamas's major funding comes from Iran. The same Iranian regime that says death to Israel, death to America. They're trying to build nuclear weapons. They want to see Israel wiped out and the Jews destroyed as well. And oh, by the way, because they're Shia Muslims, they want to destroy Saudi Arabia, Morocco, the UAE. This is not a joke, people. This is not a game. This is what they're starting with Israel, but they're coming to your house. And for the people who don't understand that, VOCAB, I know you know this, Christians are the most persecuted religion on the planet. Jews, the most ethnic group. Christians, the most thousands, tens of thousands of Christians. 43,000 Christians were killed in Nigeria in the last 12 years alone. The media doesn't talk about it. Heck, most of the church doesn't even talk about it, right? Yeah. And who's doing that killing? Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, the Fulani herdsmen, the same radical Islamists who killed these Israelis. For the Christians, therefore, who think that they're somehow doing some sort of great work by denigrating Israel and uplifting Hamas, please understand that they would go to your house and do the same thing to your wife and your children and your church. This is what people really need to understand.
Yeah, my kind of stance these days is for the church, the only answer is evangelism and intertwined with that apologetics in regards to the global problem of Islam. For the state, for a state that wants to survive and thrive, the only response or stance is strength. It's not talking it out or having a great understanding. It's none of that, because that's all useless. And you can see that when you look, you're sitting down some of these, times where you've got some of these different, whether it's Hamas or Gaza leaders sitting down with a Jewish person across the table with someone from the West trying to mediate. It's like, I think maybe we should talk about the first, that you want to kill all of my people. Right. How can we really negotiate anything here? Your whole goal is you want to, it's not even like, you remember the Klan, of course, met with an NOI back in the day, because they're like, look, let's split this up. You go you go thine way, I'll go mine. Right. So they were like willing to at least, but this isn't that. It's like, no, get you out here, and if you're in another place, we'll kill you there. It's just
Yes, sir.
It's a real thing.
And to your point, VOCAB, not only is that the case, but I want to stress for everyone again, whether it's Iran who funds Hamas, and yes, a lot of their funding also comes from the United States, right? Which we might touch on that, right? So because of UNRWA, the United Nations, that type of thing, right? And Hamas uses that money that's supposed to be used for the Palestinians, right? They use it for themselves, right? What you have now,
and that's UN should not be funding the current way the schools are set up there in Gaza, because the schools are basically 1-2 death to a Jew. I mean, I'm saying like this is what they're learning,
This has been going on for decades, right? And this was established by Yasser Arafat of the PLO. They have what's called UN-run schools, the United Nations Relief Works Agency for the Palestinian refugees. It's called UNRWA.
And they have on their payrolls Hamas peoples.
Yes, absolutely.
And again, Robert Spencer brings this out with the facts in the Palestinian delusion, but it's not only in his book, everybody. You can find this other places. There are Hamas people on the payroll there. Right. You have a guy who literally teaches science and art classes during the day and then straps a bomb to his chest during the night. No joke. You might need a substitute the next day after that one, but go ahead.
No, you're right. American taxpayer, as well as European taxpayers and others, are funding the jihad against Israel and against ourselves. Our tax dollars go. Now, please, I want to be very, very clear about this. The Palestinian people, for example, in Gaza, are very poor. They have very poor prospects in terms of school, education, jobs, all of those things. And for anybody listening to this whose heart goes out, absolutely. Mine does as well, right? Just like I do work here in the United States, what's going on in Oakland, what's going on in Baltimore, right? All the, what I call the post-BLM stuff, all the hashtags are done, the marches are done, but these cities are really, really, really hurting, right? So that's what's going on in a place like Gaza. However, it is possible to support the strengthening of and a real infrastructure for the Palestinian people and not support Hamas. You support Hamas, even knowing that they want to kill all the Jews. I'm sorry, you're on the wrong side of history, right? Not to mention the fact that Hamas doesn't care anything about the Palestinian people. They don't care. The Hamas has had unfettered rule over Gaza since 2007. 2005, Israel withdrew every last man, Jewish man, woman, and child.
By force.
By force,
want to leave. Literally, you can find the video.
They did not want to leave. Their
IDF
synagogue
guys dragging Jewish people out of their homes.
Yes, sir. Ariel Sharon, who was the prime minister at that time. And again, for those who are listening, I'm not Israel's politics or Israel's politics. That's what Israel wants to do. Fine, right? We're not even commenting on whether I thought it was a good or bad idea. I'm just saying that's what happened. And after that, Fatah, which is the police wing or the military wing of the PLO, and Hamas, which are two rival factions, they start fighting. Hamas wins that gang war, right? They take over. They've been complete control since 2007, and they have been launching rockets at Israelis ever since then. The rockets have gotten a little bit more sophisticated. Much of their funding has always come from Iran, right? This has been the case, and to VOCAB's point, it has never been about, oh, move this fence a little bit that way. Oh, we want a little bit more access to the Mediterranean. No, we're going to slaughter you and all of you. I don't care if you're a black Jew, white Jew, black Hebrew Israelite. We don't care. All of you are going to die. And what if there's any type of silver lining in this madness, VOCAB, that some people woke up a little bit, right? They were like, oh, it's not just these Ashkenazi Jews and these Khazarians and blah, 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 right? All this kind of stuff, this madness that they spit out there. They don't care what kind of Jew you are. They don't care what kind of Christian you are. They don't care if you're not the right type of Muslim. They want you dead. And it's just
like when
so
ISIS took over.
There you go.
Besides getting a hold of Christians, which if you know what's going on, you've seen really awful videos of ISIS slaughtering Christians almost in a ritualistic kind of way.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
But the largest people who died at the hands of ISIS were other Muslims who were doing it wrong. So right. The terrorists are a terror to their own people as well. Okay. And these are real things. And so, look, you guys, you may say, well, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. But listen, everything Dumisani's saying, he's just dropping facts. And, there's a quote, Spencer has this in his book, the reference and all that, where they were having a discussion about how they would, what these authorities would do once they had cleared the land where they were in control again of Israel, and how then they would have this arrangement with the Jews living underneath them. And this is conversation with just them talking amongst themselves type of thing, recorded though. And basically the answer was there won't be any Jews left. There won't be any Jews left to be dhimmis or to rule or to worry about how we're going to have a government. There will be none left. Right. And so I hope people understand that. Now, flipping back a little bit to the state side, our side, there is someone that was a Hebrew Israelite in the live chat. I'm almost positive by the comments. I'm pretty sure. Undoctrinated or undoctrined minds said this: so-called blacks, and that's why I think it's a Hebrew Israelite, the so-called there. So-called blacks ain't standing in solidarity with their own. How do you expect them to stand with another race? LOL. That's for you.
So again, I love those statements. Those are the statements they're making in a vacuum, as if they're speaking for some sort of universal thing. So let's just parse just a couple of things. So-called blacks ain't in solidarity with their own. Who are you talking about, right? I know black leaders, pastors, and non-clergy across the country, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, who are doing amazing work in their community, everything from employment to education, all of those things. And they're doing it because of their sense of responsibility to their community. So now maybe you've never seen black people stand in solidarity, but that would be your personal issue, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, if people like the civil rights leaders from long ago, like the Dr. Kings, like the A. Philip Randolphs, like the others then, who actually not just stood with Israel, but defended its right to exist, actually spoke and wanted peace in the region. If those brothers and sisters were so busy doing what they were doing in terms of the civil rights movement, how in the world did they have their head on a swivel enough to speak to what was going on 7,000 miles away? Here's for Black Americans, particularly, whoever that gentleman was, who don't understand part of their own history. We have spoken to world events since post-slavery. Frederick Douglass was the first American ambassador to Haiti. I want you to wrap your brain around that. He served and conferred with about 4 different U.S. presidents. He was the one who really advocated for black soldiers to fight in the Civil War. And he had an eye what was going on in Ghana, what was going on in Haiti, and then became the first representative. Now, here's the question. Why in the world would that black man take a post to go serve in Haiti when all the other work was left undone in the United States? And the answer to that question was that he had the intellectual acuity enough to be able to recognize what needed to be happening here in the United States and work to that end as an author, as a speaker, and was smart enough and capable enough to help even in other nations. That means, I believe the scripture says, to whom much is given, much is required. So for those who can't see past the nose on their face and figure that because their particular situation isn't as hunky-dory as it can be, other people have the ability to multitask.
That's
That
right.
was
Good answer. I like that. All right. So, you are doing this, and you've been known for these stances in public. How many interviews have you done since the stuff happened in early October? I know you did one with the Christian Post. What's been your schedule the past month? How's it been?
It's been kind of crazy. So I've had, I don't know, maybe about from the October 7th to now, maybe about 6 or 7 different ones, either online or just conversations that went to print, right? Different articles. And the other ones that are scheduled today. I mean, scheduled from that time on, right? There will be in Michigan in a few weeks, we'll be in Milwaukee. So some of them are live things, some of them are interviews, podcast, things like this, right? So there's been a large number of them that have happened, but obviously ever since the 7th of October. And not just because obviously we are a Black voice in this space, but I can be honest with you and tell you one of the main things that blew up was when Black Lives Matter Chicago chapter tweets this picture of the paragliders who actually went down and started slaughtering all these kids at a music festival in Israel, right? A lot of people just kind of lost it. We've been telling people about Black Lives Matter anti-Israel things since 2014, right? That was nothing new, right? It was just next level. So some of the calls that we got were from people who I'm sure you've experienced, vocab, who didn't want to hear what you had to say, and then something happened. And, hey, vocab, remember you were saying such. Could you? There's been a lot of that, right? Because in the sense of what we do, vocab is like we have to. In other words, we'll say something that's not popular, and then in another season, somebody might come and say, hey, man, I was kind of dumping on you. It doesn't happen a lot, and we don't do it for that reason, right? We're not trying to do for no I told you so's. We're trying to do our best and speak truth, right? Sometimes that truth is just kind of dismissed by others. And every once in a while, somebody will come. So we've had people contact the organization, say, we talked about you guys. We thought you were sellouts, but you brought the receipts. You told us about Black Lives Matter. You were absolutely right, right? So again, it's not making us feel good because the damage is done now, right? The billions of dollars in corporate pledges, the millions of dollars in donations, the indoctrination in school. Black Lives Matter, while it had there was a bait and switch. They were saying one thing on the street, but they're out there in these university campuses pushing curriculum that's calling Israel a apartheid state. They're pushing Hamas curriculum in schools while you think they're out there fighting for Black folks. They learned that from Yasser Arafat as well, right? So we've gotten lots of calls, especially around the stuff that we've already been saying for a while, and people going, okay, could you say that to us again?
What does BLM have to do with support of Hamas or Palestine, even for that matter?
So for those, you go on our website, IBSI.org. One of our videos is called, and it just a couple of weeks ago, we already planned on doing, it's called The Anti-Semitism of Black Lives Matter, right? And I've broken it down so people will understand, like any other bait and switch. Black Lives Matter is an organization that was founded in 2013 after the acquittal of the man who killed Trayvon Martin in Florida. It became a national phenomenon in 2014 after the death of Mike Brown in Ferguson. And at that time, during those protests, people began to use the hashtag Ferguson to Palestine. So as soon as we saw that.
Wait, for real? I didn't know that. I never caught that. People started saying from Ferguson to Palestine.
Ferguson to Palestine. The same way them white folks are doing that to y'all, these Jews. That's how old. Again, that comes from the Yasser Arafat era starting in the 60s, right? So it was a recycled thing. It was not only was it an okie doke, right? It was an okie doke vocab, but it was an okie doke of 50 plus years. That's why we knew what we were looking at, right? So now the question, what does Mike Brown have to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Absolutely nothing, right? But what BLM started pushing was that anything that whether, and again, what you all think about the cases, it doesn't matter, right? Barack Obama's Justice Department did a whole investigation under Eric Holder and found that Mike Brown was trying to take the guy's gun, right? So you can, whatever you want to talk about, the actual hands up, don't shoot. That's not the point. I'm not adjudicating that here. What I'm saying is that whatever your feelings around police brutality, open season on Black men, I don't care whatever your position was, right? It has nothing to do with the people of Gaza, nothing to do with the people of the West Bank, Israeli policy, none of those things. But what Black Lives Matter became was an immediate mouthpiece of disinformation against the Jewish state of Israel, using dead Black people for that purpose. How about that for exploitation, right? Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, it didn't make any difference. They would say, and this was one of the things they did. They did it with this other far left Jewish group that's called the Jewish Voice for Peace. That's not nothing like Jewish nothing. They came together and they launched a campaign vocab called Deadly Exchange. And they went to city councils across the country, and they would go to you. They said, "VOCAB, we know you're the mayor of X. We need to know that you have a problem."
I'm the person, just so you know, I'm the mayor of Whoville.
Whoville, there you go. Right,
Yeah, so,
you're the mayor of Whoville. Your police department got some serious race issues. Here's all our receipts and whatever we feel about police brutality, this, that, and the other. Israel helps train police officers and law enforcement around the world, which they do, right? Ever since 9/11, because they're the best at counterterrorism. We see that some of your top guys go to Israel once or twice a year and they get some techniques. We believe the Israelis are training your cops to be racist. Therefore, we want you to boycott Israel. They started doing that across the country. Once again, mixing two things that have nothing to do with each other. That's what Black Lives. That's just one example of the many parts of the disinformation that Black Lives Matter did. So they got all that goodwill, all that money. That wasn't in the headline. That was in the fine print. They're anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish. Of Black Lives Matter LA, we have all those receipts as well, led a pogrom-style riot in the Fairfax County of LA, trashing yeshivas, which are Jewish schools, synagogues, selling death to the Jews, death to the cops. Right? What's that got to do with Black Lives Matter? Nothing. That's how they use it as a Hamas tool.
Man, this pretty intense.
Yes, sir.
Honestly,
I get fired up. I apologize.
No, I'm just saying the whole situation. You know, it's funny because the one guy basically was earlier undoctrinated minds or whatever. He was like kind of saying basically, "Hey, man, we need to focus on this over here."
Right.
And you know, I've heard people say stuff like that in various things. It's like, well, so if you know what you based on what you're saying, someone needs to tell BLM, hey, focus, stay focused, man.
VOCAB, I told people like this: when it came to historically, it's not the Black leaders who chose the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's the conflict that chose them. See, Dr. King, they were minding their own business, right? They weren't even, it wasn't a situation where they're trying to run the world, right? But when they heard the type of disinformation, the indoctrination and stuff like that, Dr. King spoke out against anti-Semitism, absolutely, right? All kinds of hatred, right? And he spoke in favor of Israel's right to exist. And the reason I keep going back to the Dr. King era is because it was in the late 1960s that Israel's enemies, including the Arab powers and the Soviet Union, are ramping up their rhetoric targeting the Black community. They couldn't get some of the wise, the sages like the Dr. Kings, so they focused on the younger ones who had a lot of vim and vigor, but didn't have a lot of information. So they thought that they could get them to push that message. That's what began to happen. If you was a real Black man, you stood with the Palestinians, even though you didn't understand that Yasser Arafat was using Palestinian kids, 10, 11, 12 years old, putting automatic weapons in their hands, marching them to the front, hoping that they got hurt so they could blame it on Israel.
Yeah, there's a photo op, basically. Yes. You know, it's a real thing. I mean, right now, it's true that Hamas not letting a lot of people escape that want to escape. Israel tried to give them time to get out of there. They warned them. You know, you're clearly not trying to destroy the populace if you're saying, hey, we're going to come in here. Can you please get out? They've tried to allow some aid. The aid that has gotten through, my understanding is Hamas is just set on a lot of it. So it's a real thing. Now, check this out. I want to show everybody. Let me see if I can do this properly. I'm not going to play the video, but I just want to show the people the screen of it. Let me see if I can. There we go. Okay, it actually. Oh, I got the wrong name. I'll switch the name here in a second. That's from yesterday's show. But there's the video right there, and there's the little comic strip or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
What else do you guys have on the IBSI website? What else do you guys have over there?
So there are videos that are on there. That's one of our latest ones. Many other different videos that are there that are also connected to our YouTube channel. We have what's called the Africa Israel Weekly, which is our Substack. That's on our homepage. All the articles, different articles, Africa, Israel, the Black and Jewish community. We bring our perspective there as well in print so that people can have those links and all kinds of information that's there. Our peace initiative is there. People can click on that and find out how they can become a part of that. They want to be part of those Black men and women who are recruited from across the country, and they go through the whole peace initiative and travel to South Africa and travel to Israel. All that information is on ibsi.org.
Would you say that Christians are supportive of your work, or do you find a lot of Christians who are sort of against your guys' agenda too?
The vast majority, both in the Black community and beyond, are very supportive. What happens is, that's so funny. I was one of the we were at a church Sunday for an event, and it was the event wasn't Hispanic, but the host church was Hispanic, right? And one of the pastors came to me. He asked me the question, do you get pushback from the Black community? And I told him the same thing I tell everybody. We don't get a lot of pushback from the Black community, right? Social media is a different thing. And VOCAB is one of the people who knows social media is one world, but then there's the real world. That's the actual physical world, right? So they don't always line up. They oftentimes don't line up. The Black leaders, pastors, community leaders, and others, church members, when they see our work and access our work or host us for the events and everything, they are overwhelmingly supportive. They'll often say things like, hey, IBSI, thank you for this. I didn't realize this, or I didn't know this, or I hadn't heard about this in a long time, right? I remember years ago, I was talking, it was a relative of mine. They saw some of the work we're doing and said, yeah, you know what, Dumisani, I don't know about all that. It's solidarity with Israel. He said, I sent the Palestinians, they're being oppressed and everything. And I said, no, I hear you. And I started telling him about how Mahmoud Abbas is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, how the head of Hamas is worth about 2-point-something billion. These are billionaires and millionaires. When I started talking about all the money that they get that's supposed to help people, he said, I didn't know any of that. And we get that almost all the time.
Arafat's widow, after he died, ran off with a whole bunch of money because there was a bunch of money sitting in that Arafat bank. You know?
He was, ladies and gentlemen, he was a billionaire. And we share this information as well. Mahmoud Abbas's house was worth about $13 million in the occupied West Bank. Here he is in the occupation, dude living fat, right? And not just him, they're people of Fatah, Hamas. Now, the regular, ordinary people, come on, y'all, let's just be real. There are the fat cats in Oakland, and then there are the folks out there who are struggling with homelessness and poverty and crime and everything, right? That's the same thing. You're going to find some universal truths here, ladies and gentlemen. Hamas and Fatah, they'll give us, we want to enter the occupation. They don't want no into nothing. These guys have made billions of dollars on the quote-unquote conflict. Why in the world would they want that to stop and that money gravy train to stop? Yes. Do they want to kill Jews? Yes. But somehow they want to kill Jews and get our tax money, right? Isn't that amazing? They want to kill Jews. They want you and me to pay them for it. And that's how stupid we are. We've been paying them for it for decades, right? We've been feeding into UNRWA. We've been giving money to the Palestinian Authority. My God, right after the attack, our president announced that he would send another $100 million to the Palestinian Authority, right? And right after he announced that, Mahmoud Abbas said that in the next Friday prayers, the imams need to preach death to Israel, right? They need to death to the Jews. Right after we gave him more money, he said, let's go kill some more Jews, right? That's what's actually going on here now. So if you think they think we're stupid, I'm sorry, I think we're stupid too.
Yeah, well, hey, man, don't knock the hustle.
You know what I'm saying? Hey. Don't hate the play, hate the game, right? If you're going to make hundreds of millions and billions of dollars on that whole game that you're playing, nobody in their right mind would stop that, right? So if they make that kind of money, talking about free Palestine, we want to enter the occupation, and they see these kids on these campuses waving their flags, come on, man. Are you serious right now? Then you're loved by the populace. You're loved by, especially those in the media. And you're making all that money. You know what, y'all? When the attacks started like they did on October 7th, like always, you know, the top leaders of Hamas live in Qatar in penthouses and 5-star hotels. They weren't even there. They're not even there. Just like you tweeting stuff from your house, they tweeting stuff from their penthouse talking about death to Israel. Now, the folks out there dying that are being killed by the IDF, they don't care about them. That's cannon fodder. Those dudes ain't going to get their fingernails dirty. They're going to fly around in their private jets and make all that money.
No doubt. It's I remember they're doing these interviews now with these Hamas soldier guys, and one said, "Yeah, we were told that if we came back with a hostage, we get $10,000 in an apartment." Man,
that's good money if you live in the United States. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hey, the VOCAB, they get money. The money was called pay for slave in 2018, and this is not a political statement, just telling people that so you'll know. Under the Trump administration, the Congress passed what's called the Taylor Force Act. And what is that? The Taylor Force Act, which is now law, declares that the United States cannot send money to the Palestinians knowing that they're going to use it for terrorism, right? Not only do we still, now that means the money that the Biden administration is giving to the Palestinian Authority, he's breaking the law, not according to Dumisani, not according to the Institute for Black Solidarity of Israel, according to the law. How do we know it? Because Mahmoud Abbas has never stopped saying he would use it for terrorism. They said, we will pay the shaheeds. A shaheed is a martyr. We will pay them. So if you hurt somebody, you get a certain amount of money. If you kill somebody, you get a certain amount of money, up to $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Come on, now that's pretty good money, even if you live in the States. And Iran kicked in and said, we will buy you a new house. Now you're talking about people who are already poor, who've already been indoctrinated to hate Jews, and you're going to pay them to kill them? Come on now.
So, yeah, it's like a no-brainer. In a twisted worldview, it's a no-brainer.
Yes,
in an upside-down world. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking right now to Dumisani Washington, IBSI, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, on the website right now, described as dedicated to strengthening the relationship between Israel and the Jewish people and people of African descent through education and advocacy, condemns the Zionism is racism ideology, defends Israel's right to live in peace with its Arab neighbors, and seeks to help cultivate a mutually beneficial Israel-Africa alliance. Through the 1975 United Nations resolutions, 3379, Zionism is racism, was revoked in 1991. Its effects are still felt today as the UN constantly condemns Israel while largely ignoring true humanitarian crises all over the Middle East and Africa. IBSI also exposes the hypocrisy of anti-Israel Arab Islamists such as Hamas, who condone and benefit from the trafficking and sale of African slaves while feigning solidarity with black people. IBSI exists to tell the truth about Israel, a multi-ethnic liberal democracy that is diversity by choice. So, guys, now you know. That's pretty good. So right there on the website, lots of stuff going on. When I was going through here, I actually got distracted because I saw you have 10 questions for Black Hebrew Israelites.
Yes, sir. Yes,
sir. What's this? I got to check this out.
We did that several years ago, VOCAB. About 5-6 years ago, right? As a matter of fact, one of my friends, he's actually a Rastafarian he's Zimbabwean. He actually lives in the UK. And we kind of collaborated on that and everything. It was a little quick little card that's on there. It's like 10 of different points. And that's specifically for those radical ones who, again, because there's a Hebrew community that's based in Chicago. I haven't talked about it in my book, how far back they go to the 19th century and that type of thing.
Talking about Dimona?
Not Dimona. So Dimona, it's funny. So Dimona was the group that they moved there in Chicago, from Chicago in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
The leader wasn't Ben Ami, but it became Ben Ami, right? They came out of a synagogue in Chicago. That synagogue is still there, but they don't really have an affiliation with that in the same way. So the person who's over the synagogue there is Rabbi Capers Fune.
Oh, you're talking about Michelle Obama's cousin.
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So Ben Ami came out of that group back in the 60s, right? Of course, Michelle Obama's cousin wasn't over at that point.
Right. Different guy at that time,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They're peaceful. I mean, he has Rabbi Fune serves on different boards and works throughout the Jewish community, all of that stuff. He's travels to Israel and everything like that. You can see him in lots of different spaces, right? But I'm talking about the ones on the street corners, the ones or those from the pulpit, the white Jews are fake and all of the kind of that type of thing, right? So that thing that we did 10 questions for Black Hebrew Israelites, we asked them just some basic questions on a very, very basic level. Like, okay, for on the black ones, then what shade of black? We're trying to be, we're just being real, right? Well, Dumisani black, Will Smith black, right? Talcum X, but I mean, my man, black, which black are you talking about, right? If you're making this a color thing, right? And we go on, we talk about that. We talk about the slave trade. We ask some basic fundamental questions because, as you already know, VOCAB, and you do this on a different level, you do a lot with the different groups. There is a basic lack of understanding of scripture that often along with all the propaganda, there's a lack of understanding of the basic text that oftentimes these radical groups are using because they have an agenda, right? And that would be true. I don't care who they are. They're white supremacist groups who call themselves Christians, who will read certain things into the text, and based on that, because
like
quote unquote
Christian identity movement, for example.
Yeah. See what I'm saying? Yes, sir. I mean, so you have that. So it's not just a black thing, right? It's the different ones who take the Bible and they're going to make this exclusive group. This is for only Cubans. Cubans are the only one. I'm just making it up. And then everybody else, and here's all the scriptures as to why if you're not Cuban, you can't be saved. That's been going on for a very, very, very long time. So the Black Hebrew Israelites, those radical sect, they didn't make it up. It's just their latest versions, a mixture of a little bit of black nationalism and all the other kind of stuff. And so, yeah, that's what that one was that we did.
All right, got a couple more things. I'm looking in the live chat. Tomer Klein He's a Jewish friend of mine who is not a believer in the Messiah that's come. He's still waiting on his guy, but we are friends, and I appreciate our relationship. He gave a super chat, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you for that, Tomer. And he said this: vocab, great interview. The gentleman, that's you, has a great knowledge on day-to-day Orthodox Jewish life and the threats at hand, but also the history of both of our communities. Keep up the good work. So that's a compliment to you. So
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that,
yes,
Tomer.
sir.
Thank you
Right
so much,
on.
sir.
Now I got one that's critical. Jamal Madison says, this conversation is personal. You are literally painting the Black community as haters of Jews.
Absolutely opposite. So whenever Jamal may have logged on, if you haven't, you might go back it up. And I've even, one of the questions posed to me was, is the Black community against Israel? I even said, absolutely not. The vast majority have supported Israel and supported the Jewish people. So you, depending on where you may have caught the conversation, the problem is in an extended conversation, you might hear something out of context. Jamal, I said the exact opposite multiple times here. I talked about how anti-Israel and anti-Semitic forces have attempted to use the Black community for the purposes of Jew hatred, but we didn't, in no way. I've said the opposite in terms of the Black community being against Israel and against the Jewish people.
Yeah, that's true. I can vouch for that. He talked about, social media also being one thing, but then real life being another, and the support you see, day to day and on the ground. But that doesn't mean that he wouldn't talk about some of the stuff that BLM has said, for example, because that makes sense in the context of this conversation. So that's what we definitely talked about as well.
Absolutely.
So what do you see for the future for what you guys are trying to do to get into your work? What do you guys got coming up, and what do you hope happens? What are some plans?
Well, our immediate plans, vocab, is to continue our peace initiative. We talked about that once again, recruiting, whether it's non-clergy or clergy, to do that, what we call 9-month journey of study and traveling to Israel and Africa, so that they can be advocates on the ground where they are, whether we're helping give pastors and ministries the tools that they need, or others in other parts of the community. As we continue to coordinate closely with Africa, my daughter-in-law is actually South African, and although she's based here. And so we do a lot of work, obviously, on the continent where Israel is Africa is concerned. So our plan is to continue that and expand it going forward so we can have more and more people who are part of it. We also plan to, hopefully in the next maybe year or two, have a brick and mortar that's here where we are in either the Raleigh area or the Charlotte area that serves as an institute where people can actually come and study these things in-house as well, not just online with different professors, different leaders. We're doing work with what's called Africa Israel or Africa Agency. It's an organization that was founded by Pastor Shagun. That's it's a shortened version of his name. He's based in South Africa, but he has Black American connectors as well. And so we've been working with him. So that's our goal, is to expand the teaching and the advocacy aspect of this, while we actually also, not with IBSI, but another part of what our family does in terms of the business realm, do a lot of more business connections where Israel and Africa and the Black and Jewish communities are concerned. We see that as important going forward, because those economic opportunities are what actually change people's lives on the ground, right? How we actually affect areas that need to be touched on, more finances, more resources, school education, that type of thing as well.
Excellent. Shout out to everyone in the live chat. See a number of people still coming in. I hope you guys appreciating the conversation. Dumisani, I have linked the link for his book in the top of the live chat, so you can actually get that. And it's also the link to his website, so you can go there. Right now, 47% of the live chat says no, they are not a Zionist. But hold on, I need to look at the full data. 21% say yes. 46% say no. 32% say not sure. If I was taking the poll, I almost might hit that one myself, because it would depend how someone would define it. It'd be tough. But I knew that, but it's only so much you can do in a little poll like this.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to have you define Zionism, because if it is as simple as Israel has the right to exist, right. Israel has a right to defend itself, Israel is a Jewish homeland. If it's, say, those three things, then I guess by that definition I'd be a Zionist. If someone's basing their case more on like what they view as biblical prophecy. Obviously, I believe in biblical
Right.
prophecy, but I would be more
Right, right.
agnostic or unsure with that case. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yes, sir. No, I was going to say, just, I mean, obviously the poll, it would be interesting if you all ran the poll and just asked one of those basic questions: do you feel Israel has the right to exist? Just as a poll, and just see from there, right? Not even use the term Zionist. It would be interesting, whatever the results would be. You know what I mean?
Does Israel have a right? Let me see if I can do 2 polls in a show. Looks like I can. Does Israel have a right to exist? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and if you make it longer, so and defend itself, or either one, do you feel Israel does Israel have the right to exist? That would be an interesting one too. I would imagine, I don't know for sure, right? But I'd imagine there would be probably overwhelmingly yes, and without using the term Zionist, because again, that term now has become so tainted and has become so used. People use that as a slur, right? I mean, Dr. King even talked about it. So they would call a Jew a Zionist, meaning someone who wasn't, not just you're calling them a derogatory name, you're saying Zionist by definition, you don't care about America, you only care about Israel, you are a white supremacist Jewish person. Therefore, they're using it in that type of term. So it's been used in so many different ways that, yeah, people, when they hear that term, they usually think of something negative.
All right, now let's wrap up with just a few more questions, so we won't have too long to discuss it. But I want to try to do this to maybe talk about some things that might be differences, but I don't know exactly there. So you and I think, would both affirm the diversity of ancient and modern Jewry. You know, the diversity. We would also, I think, affirm that someone who is either Jewish by being in some way descended from Abraham, or obviously convert, can kind of look any kind of way. You know, there's no limit or parameter on there, especially when we're talking about it in 2023. But I think you would affirm that Igbo are Israelites, and and if I understand you correctly, and I do not think that's correct, but help me understand your position briefly, because I didn't want to make the whole show about this, but I just wanted to talk about this too, because it's interesting and all that. Tell me about that, please.
So the Igbo, and it's often spelled with the G. Sometimes it's not with the IBO, but it's pronounced Igbo. They are a tribe in West Africa, largely in Nigeria, but they're also in other areas of West Africa. So I believe Benin is
40,000. How many?
40 million.
Why do I always do that? I know the number's big, and I always say 40,000. I'm sorry, I apologize, but okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes. So they are, and let me say right off the bat, every Igbo doesn't believe about his own Israelite identity, meaning there's even debate within that tribe, right? But having said that, the research that I've done and the colleagues that I have, one premier one would be Mr. Remy Alona. Y'all can Google him as well. Remy
I know
Alona.
who that is.
You know who that is? Yes, sir. Have you interviewed him before? No.
No, I haven't. But go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So he is one of the premier voices that he's actually a professor now at UC Riverside. He's from Nigeria, of course, not living in the States. His work and others as well for the receipts. And I talk about that. I'm not just talking about just some folklore thing. I'm talking about the type of Omanana is what they would call their version of Torah or Torah principles, if you will. And having read through, seen, and talked with other rabbis, other religious Jews who are not even Igbo, right, from different sects, there's great debate about it still. Just for people can have some context, there was great debate about the Ethiopian Jews to this day. Not as much as then, but to this day, there's still people who debate about Beta Israel, whether or not the Ethiopian Jews are actually real Jews. So it's a similar type of debate there. So based on the readings that I've done, the things that I have seen, the conversations that I've had with people much more knowledgeable about it than me, having gone through those receipts, I've had over the years become convinced that there is truth and veracity to the Igbo claims of Israelite heritage. That's from mine. That's a short version.
So what do you think practical ramifications or applications for that would be? For example, could it then extend into other people, Fulani, or I'm sorry, is that the right? Ashanti, could it extend out? How deep could that go? Is it, how limited is it that across the African continent we have people that you would see as descendants of Israelites. What do you think about that? Because I know we're talking about the Igbo, but who
Right,
else?
right. So for me, again, this is for me, and obviously I speak for organization, through the narrow lens of the Igbo, when we're talking about that particular Israelite claim, that's the work that we have done in terms of reading, checking out, talking, going to lectures, and having those conversations. I am aware, and I have been aware of this for a long time, right? Of the Ashanti claims. I'm aware of some of the other Yoruba claims, the different ones. As a matter of fact, I did my DNA a couple of years ago. I'm like 80-something% Yoruba, right? And I've had others tell me, yeah, these are Israelites as well. I have not, this is me, I'm answering your question. I have not seen the same level of scholarship and receipts brought from those other claims as I have the Igbo. Now, again, does it mean I'm right? No. I'm saying that for me has been the case, which is why I feel so strongly where the Igbo is concerned. I don't speak to the other ones as much because I personally haven't seen that level of detail that has been brought in terms of evidence.
What do you think the ramifications will be for Black and Jewish, Black and Israel, let's say Africa and Israel, relations, solidarity, lack thereof, if that was true and more widely accepted?
It's funny. I think it would have some impact and then not at all on the other side. Meaning that similar to and for all my Beta Israel friends, my Ethiopian Israeli friends, I'm not trying to make them the same. I'm just using some parallels, if you will. The reason I referred to not just the Ethiopian Jews, but the Aliyah, maybe from the 1980s when they began to make Aliyah and the airlifts, they would come from Ethiopia to Israel.
Operation
Is that
Moses, right? Yeah.
Right, Operation Moses, Operation Solid. As a matter of fact, even for those operations, one of my dear friends, Yafa, her dad is Baruch Tajeni. He passed away. He was one of the architects of that whole thing, right? Before the airlifts, there are people who were very bravely on the Israeli and the Ethiopian side were actually having these back channel conversations and stuff, right? So there are people, Israelis included, who didn't believe, not all, but many of them didn't believe that these were real Jews, right? They don't know really what's their claims, that and the other, even though they brought all the receipts in terms of the millennia that they've been keeping all these traditions and everything, right? I believe that something similar would happen where the Igbo was concerned. Not the exact same, similar in that there'll be plenty of people who still wouldn't believe it, even though it became accepted, right? And that it would have conversations around the slave, once again, the whole Black Hebrew Israelite thing. Oh, the slaves who came were all Israelite. I don't believe in that sense, but what I do believe is that the Igbo who were taken, which are a large percentage, are, right? So then that's going to spur that conversation, which is actually already happening, right? The conversation about the Igbo who actually came to the Americas, those conversations have been going on for a long time. They've been happening kind of off the grid, but I believe what people are going to see here in the coming years is that they're going to become more and more in the forefront, right? They're going to actually be having the conversation, what it means. Now, most Igbo I know are actually Christian, right? So they're in terms of their faith, right? So that conversation is going to be thrown into the mix. Some are Orthodox in terms of their beliefs. They're not Christian and they keep a very much more strict Jewish lifestyle and those types of things. So it's going to be, I believe, a huge conversation that has a lot of ramifications. It's going to bring some clarity, some stuff, and I think it's going to cause some issues on a lot of other levels too.
Have people called you a Black Hebrew Israelite because of that position?
Every once in a while, I'll get that, yeah, but not very much, right? Usually what people, if there's something on a negative thing, they'll just say that I'm a Jew, or that I'm trying to be a quote unquote Jew, whatever that means for them, right? So, but in terms of a Black Hebrew Israelite, I've gotten not very much. That hasn't been very much of the claim.
So, even though from what I've looked at with the Igbo, I, as of now, haven't been convinced. There's always more to learn. I'm not sort of in principle opposed to it because I do hold the Limba are Semitic people. Okay. So down in South Africa and Zimbabwe. So it's not sort of the like a principle of it or anything like that. It's just I think the Limba have a much firmer or stronger case, basically, I guess I would say, from what I've seen in the various ways and stuff. And I know this is a controversy with Jewish Voice, with the Igbo and then kind of going to the Limba later on instead. But I do want people to also see that, people can work together, be brothers in the Lord, not agree about all these things, because what defines us is not really who we think's an Israelite or not. It's who we think Jesus is, who we think God is,
Yes, sir.
and
Yes, sir.
who we are in light of that. That's a most
Absolutely.
important thing.
Absolutely.
Today you said you would describe. Are you still considered a pastor, like ordained somewhere, or is it just that you preach, or a church? Or I thought you said at one point you still are.
I am. I was ordained in the 1990s by my bishop at the time, and so I am. I am a pastor still. The church that we planted, which is called the Congregation of Zion, it's in Stockton, California. When we moved, we left the other pastors there in charge, so it's still there now. At some point, we will plant its sister congregation out here in the Charlotte area. We haven't done it yet, but it could happen any time in the next year or so. And so, yeah, so I still serve as almost like an overseer, like a bishop of that congregation. We'll be planning one here and other parts of the country. So, yes, sir. So I'm still in that sense a pastor. Yes, sir.
Well, plant a congregation, you're going to be busier than ever.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. That's why we're trying to prayerfully see about the timing.
Yeah, it's taking on a lot there.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely.
No joke. Sunday worship or Saturday worship there?
Saturday. We've been Sabbath worshipers for my family for the last 30 plus years, and this was a journey for my wife and me. When our oldest children were little bitty kids, we began to keep the traditional Sabbath. We observed the feast, we observed Passover and tabernacles, all those things. We began to, as Christians, call it Hebrew roots Christians. Some people too use the term messianic. We don't usually use that term, but there's different generic terms that are used, and we began to be quote unquote Hebrew roots Christians probably back in the early 1990s.
All right. Well, maybe together sometime we can get together and talk more theology and whatnot, but I know this is about our time limit. Orthodox Moore, an interesting friend of mine, he asks me, is my trepidation with the Igbo acceptance of the limba, sorry, I didn't read the question right, but it's on the screen, based upon the CMH vocab? Yes, partially, maybe I would even say largely, but there are other factors. Now, I would be curious, Orthodox Moore, what you thought, for example, what would be interesting to see. And there's a lot to discuss about this, and it can be interesting, and I like it when people can do it without vitriol and all that. So shout out to you, Orthodox Moore. Thank you for the question and all of that. Well, I appreciate your time and all the work you're doing. I encourage you to keep it up. And I know you're going to be busy in the next month, and especially once you plant that church, even busier.
Yes, sir.
But
Yes, sir.
Shout out to your family, too. Maybe sometime I can talk to the younger Washington, since he's also part of IBSI.
Absolutely. I think it'd be great. It'd be great for you guys to connect and everything. And plus, you're a musician. I know you both rap and you write, I think, do different music and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's, local, regional, underground rapper guy. I did that, and some slam poetry. But I don't think I could ever probably qualify myself as a real musician. I could just call myself as a trying artist at some point.
No, absolutely, yes, sir. Well, my son, and when he's not doing this, I mean, that is his thing. So you guys have a great conversation. But I want to just say thanks again for having me on the platform. Appreciate it. Giving me the shout out and letting people kind of check it out and see. Right. So I really do appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate, Tioga, who had lots of disagreeing comments. He still nonetheless put great show. So, hey, I appreciate that, Ty. See, we can, not agree on everything and all that and still talk and put your questions there and try to deal with them. So I think that's great. So shout out to you and all of that. Everyone, listen, tomorrow I'm going to try to discuss this situation between the pro-Palestinian crowd and the Hebrew Israelites in Chicago, but it may need to get moved to Thursday. So Nate and Andrea, everybody, please hold up on posting it for a second, because we may have to move it to Thursday because I got to do some sermon prep. So anyways, shout out to everyone who came through, and I look forward to talking to you again, Dumisani. Thank you very much, brother.
Thanks a lot, VOCAB. Appreciate it, sir.
Yes, sir. All right. We are out.